with that. Okay, and we're off. So good question. For the CPA to be deemed complete, and then you'll be done with the CPAs, a post has to be made by next Tuesday. However, because of the craziness of all this remote stuff and the fact that I know that you guys got a ton of other stuff going on and, you know, hundreds of other things going on with your classes, I'm being extremely lenient with due dates. And I'm not going to take really any points or penalty off for turning stuff in, you know, later than the normal week. It's just that with the CPAs, I still want to keep to our normal cadence on the CPAs. Does that make sense, Ethan? All right. But as far as the forum post and your reply, basically, if you've been paying attention to those, the back end of those due dates, basically, guys, everything in this class from here on out, as long as you can get everything in that you need to get in, you know, by what is that, like May the whatever that Saturday or Sunday is, May the 2nd, something around there. Let me check my dates on here. Yeah, that's May the 3rd. All right. So, and then we start into exam week, May 4th, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. I'm trying to hopefully everything that you guys, other than the paper and the final exam, try to get everything that if you're kind of lagging behind a little bit in by that May the 3rd date. Okay. Because I'm just trying to, like I said, everybody is learning how to do this kind of together. And so whatever you need. The thing is with the quizzes and stuff, I want you to try to get those in somewhat soon so that the stuff doesn't all start smushing together and then you get confused about which W's is on this quiz and who goes to that quiz. So if you can keep the cadence going with the quizzes, try to get it done within a week's time, then you can just sort of leave that stuff behind and then focus on the next stuff. Okay. So that'll be helpful for you for best success in here. What else? So make sure, like I said, try to get quiz 3 done somewhat soon. Forum post and reply, try to get that in, you know, within a week or so. But for the CPA to be complete, and then we're done with CPAs, we got to have at least a forum post of some sort by next Tuesday. Everybody cool with that? Good. And again, that forum post is in relation to the really cool BBC video on the Crusades that we're watching for this week. And also what you're doing is you're acting, if you haven't read through what the forum is all about, you're going to pretend that you're the instructor for a class. So you're going to play the professor. All right. And you're going to pretend that you're the instructor for a class, and you're going to you're going to go out onto the World Wide Webs somewhere and find a helpful link that you would show your class if you were teaching something on the Crusades. All right. And so I just wanted to see what you guys would show. All right. If you guys were the professor to talk about the Crusades. Okay. And that's what that forum post is. And then, you know, hopefully we'll have a bunch of clickable links that when you look at your buddy's forum post that you click on, and you're like, that's cool. I didn't think about that site. Be smart with your choices. Obviously, conform to netiquette standards. Don't put something on there like, you know, something's, you know what I mean? Like, don't go to disreputable sites like the muslimsdidit.com or something like that. You know, it's you know, it's just, there's some good sites out there on the Crusades. There's lots of good sites. There's also some trash out there as well. So just be discriminating in your choices on those. Coolio with that. Awesome. I saw that almost everybody has the annotated bibliography in, so I'll be checking those out and getting some comments going in the next 24, 48 hours on those. From what I've read through, they look awesome so far. I can't wait to look at them, and hopefully they've been helpful to you. Is that cool for? I think that's it for the notes that I had, like announcement wise. Anybody got any comments, questions for me at all? No? All right. It's good to see everybody's faces. Everybody have good Easters? Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of chocolate bunnies. What else? Had some good Easter meats. It's good. All right. All right. So today, all right, we want to talk about if you were able to view the notes that I posted yesterday, that would be awesome. If not, view those today. Talking about the investiture controversy and those types of things. But today I want to get into some of the parts about the Crusades, because I asked you to have a few sources ready. The first one is 10.5 from your omnibus book. So if you got that, it'd be cool to look at. If not, no biggie. You can look at it later when you review this. But 10.5 is the chronology of the Crusades, all right, in the omnibus. And you can see that they were, as it's described up top, occasional eruptions of violence. And that's a pretty accurate way to describe them. I mean, some people, you can see there, about 12 crusades in all. And it's just craziness to look at how it extends over a period of time from 1095 until 1291. And a lot of people are just familiar generally with the most famous crusade. Generally is seen as the Third Crusade, the one of Richard the Lion-Hearted and Philip Augustus and Frederick the Redbeard, Barbarossa. That's what that translates out to, Redbeard, Frederick the Redbeard of Germany. And that's usually that's the one, if you've seen the movie, who was that with? Was that with Kingdom? Was it called Kingdom of Heaven? Maybe you've seen that movie or not. It was a movie about the Crusades. That's what that depicts, Richard the Lionheart and all that stuff. But what I want to focus on is the crusading spirit and the origins of the crusade, and the only one that was truly successful, and that's the first one. Okay, the only crusade that was truly successful, meaning that it accomplished its aims, and its aims were to take back Jerusalem. Its aims were to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim control. The only one to accomplish that was the first one. Okay, and the thing is you can look at the first Crusades participants, and chapter 10 has like the roll call of all the people who went, but there's the list here. I'm not going to make you remember, who was Godfrey of Bouillon, and who is Bohemond of Toronto. I'm not going to make you remember that. But what you have to realize is not one like major king participated in this. So if you're looking at like who were the major kings going around, I mean, look at these dates. 1098, all right, 1098 is the date of the publication of the Doomsday Book, if we are remembering our dates off the top of our head, right? So William of Normandy, aka King of England and Normandy, is alive and well during this time period, and he doesn't participate in the crusade. So that's the cool thing that you guys need to start to understand about the Crusades are, and you got this from the notes if you watched them last night. If not, make sure you get it here. These Crusades were, yes, they were religious excursions, but they were also just as much quests for fiefs, quests for land and title. And that's the thing that I think is a little bit sometimes, I'm having a little disruption here with the interwebs. Can everybody see me and hear me still? Yes, no, maybe so.
Your image is still like you're stuck in one place.
I am. Come back. Why am I stuck like that? Hey, all right. Cheers. Um, uh, these were quests for knights that were in search of more territory, and there wasn't any land left to feed fowl. Okay, so that's another one of those aspects of the First Crusade that I hope that you get. So let's get to what we wanted to talk about. First part for today is in your book, main textbook, page 297, and then forward, they had that speech of Urban II. I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to look at this from the illuminated manuscript of Urban up there talking to everybody at the council in France, at Clermont in France. All right. And one of the cool things about the BBC video that I hope that you guys like is they really do a good job hitting home on what it exactly was that he was going after. All right. So do you guys, if we can kind of backtrack for a little bit, and I'll just stop sharing for a second. Do you guys remember, if you looked at those notes that I put on there yesterday, the Emperor Alexius, the Byzantine Emperor Alexius, why is he calling out for help? You guys remember why he was, what was the context behind the Crusades? Go ahead and you can type it in, you can call it out. Everybody's unmuted.
They're losing land from the Turks.
They're losing land to the Turks.
Or to the Turks, sorry.
Right. And that land, conceptually, if you're looking at it, there's a great map in your book. There's also one that I have on the notes, but it's that peninsula out here, all right, that we've been talking about, this very important peninsula called the Anatolian Peninsula, and they're losing lots and lots and lots of that territory. So he calls out, remember, the Byzantine leaders and the papacy are not friends. They're not friends at all. They're not very friendly. They haven't been friendly for a couple hundred years. And you can start to see some of the interesting dynamics behind that relationship working its way out here. But he calls out for help. And what he wants is, he wants the best of the best. He wants the Christian knights. And what he gets showing up on his door is some knights, but mostly a gigantic horde of peasants. And he's not excited at all to see that, okay? So back to this point, if we can come back and look at our screen again, this guy, Urban, does really well, perhaps maybe too well, in communicating the desire to go on crusade to the people. And it was a sales pitch, no doubt about it. So what about, if you can see him, giving this speech here, if we can come now and look at his speech, what about his sales pitch did you guys find maybe most intriguing or most capturing? Yeah, go ahead. You can type stuff in if you don't feel comfy talking. There's a really, that's a pretty decent speech that they put there in the book. Or you can you can call it out, whatever you guys want. What parts of that sort of speak to sales pitch or sales pitchy? All right. I'll start us off. Hey, all right. We got some people chiming in here. Fish said he talks about how they have destroyed the churches. Okay. Who's they? You're talking about he's talking about, you mean the, yes, okay, the Persians, the Muslim. You're going to see here's the thing with these sources, guys, and you're going to read some of these that I've linked on Canvas as well. You're going to see a bunch of different descriptions of Muslims. They're not going to be called very often Muslims in the medieval in the medieval sources. Sometimes they're going to be called Persians. Sometimes most often you're going to see them referred to as this word. Okay, Saracens. Have you ever heard of that word? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Saracens is how they're going to be, and that was a kind of a catch-all term. Today, it would be seen as a kind of a ethno-racist type term. It would be akin. The only way to the only way to describe it. And Miles made a cool comment. I'll come back to that in a minute. Thanks, Miles. The only way to describe how Saracens is if you were to today, it would be, and this would be terrible, but if you were to describe everybody who's of Latin descent as Mexicans. Does that make sense? Okay, so that would be what they were doing in the Middle Ages. Is everybody who was of Arabian look or descent, anybody who was seen as an Arab, they just called them Saracens. And the Saracens who they were just one tribe in Arabia. And like I said, so it's basically taking the whole ethnic group of Latinos and just calling them all Mexicans. Okay. So that term, when you hear it, Saracens, it means literally the entire Muslim world. Okay. So sometimes you'll hear them refer to that. You're going to read the sources today and this week, specifically the one that I've linked that describes the siege of Jerusalem, where they describe these people as Saracens constantly. Okay, so I didn't want you to get confused on who that was. So let me read through some of these really good comments over here. Kanzi says correctly, it's very detailed and graphic. Absolutely. Emotions, that's a great one. Yes, this was, you kind of read this, it was very much like a halftime, or a pregame like football speech. It's demeaning in many ways. Miles said it reminds you of World War I propaganda. Okay, that's an interesting. That's interesting because he's does a good job of calling them a race utterly alienated from God and a cursed race. Just really ugly language. And the video will do another really good job of talking about that, and a cursed race. Actually, Hannah picked that up. So, Ethan, what'd you say here? Jerusalem, therefore, yes, Jerusalem cries out, asks for your aid. This is towards the end of the speech. Towards the end of that speech, too, if you get that kind of second last paragraph, does he not describe in that second last paragraph that this is kind of a land that flows with milk and honey? Did you guys pick that up? All right, he says, win back the Holy Land from the wicked, place it under your dominion, for it flows with milk and honey and was given by God himself to the children of Israel. That is really enticing to people who have nothing. And so everybody thinks like this. The big thing I want to get out of your heads with the Crusades is, and if you do have your book, it would be cool if you could look at page 304 of the map, and I'll share my screen as well if we can move forward a little bit on looking at the paths of the Crusades here. You can see where a lot of these people are coming from. Okay, you can see, have I shared my screen there? Maybe I have, maybe I haven't. Let me share. If you're looking at that map, like I said, that is not a close place, meaning that the places where they are walking to, in some cases, are as far as 1,800, 2,000 miles if you're looking at the map key. Okay. So I want to get out of your head that this is just kind of a army that's on top of heavy horse, and it's all kind of dudes in chainmail, and that's just not at all what this crusade was. This was, think of it like a gigantic horde of 60 to 100,000, just a mob of people walking, and they would be singing songs, and they would be uh, literally walking. The majority of them, the vast majority of them. Horses, guys, during this era are so freaking expensive. The only the upper elites are going to have access to horses. Okay, and those who are riding the horses are not going to. You're not going to ride them the whole time, because you want the horse to be ready for battle. So the vast majority of people, you're going to be walking. You're literally going to be walking. This is, like I said, this distance would be like if you and I set out right now and just decided we were going to walk down to like Tampa, Florida, and maybe even longer than that. And that's just crazy to think about. All right, it's just crazy to think that you could walk that distance. And as the video rightly describes, these people are living hand to mouth, meaning that they don't know. The vast majority of them have no clue where their next meal is coming from. And what starts to happen, and you're gonna start to see this, this terribleness that occurs on the Crusades. If I can click on this slide right here, is they begin to attack villages. They begin to attack people on the way there. And one of the most sickening aspects of the First Crusade is you get at least, from the sources, at least a dozen occurrences, and this is just the ones that we can find in the sources, at least a dozen occurrences of massive attacks on Jews on the way to Constantinople. That's the thing that people don't understand about this First Crusade, is how massively and utterly disorganized the whole dang thing was. They had one plan. The plan was just, let's meet in Constantinople and figure it out from there. All right, let's just all meet in Constantinople and figure it out. So this thing is completely disorganized, and that's the aspect of it is we have this romanticized image of the Crusades in our heads, when in reality it was legit just a horde of people walking, disorganized, hungry, starving in many cases, and as you can see from this illuminated manuscript, massacring people. In many cases, Jews. The book will describe a few of these. My notes will describe a few of these, and I'll talk about it in the video. The sources, I want to share another source that I want you guys to read here. One of the interesting sources that I want to show you is linked on Canvas, and is one of our sources that I want you to look at. The massacre of the Rhineland Jews is described in this source up here. If I can click on it. Sometimes these things are hard to click on. But it just, I mean, like I said, just really disturbing things that start to happen, because and this is one of those interesting things. Yes, here you can see from the medieval source book. All right, I want you guys to read through the sources. They describe one of these Jewish massacres occurring in the Rhineland, which is Germany. This also will hopefully knock out any thoughts in your head that, and sometimes when you encounter history for the first time and you're looking at it, you're like, gee, where did Hitler and the Nazis come up with all that anti-Semitic stuff? Guys, anti-Semitism is, in many cases, as old as Christianity itself. And there are just time and time again instances of anti-Semitic, really disturbing anti-Semitic behavior occurring throughout the Middle Ages. So, this whole belief that when Hitler and the Nazis do come about, they're exposing and they're cutting open wounds that had been in German society and European society for hundreds and hundreds of years. Okay, so when you guys look at that in history and begin to study that in history, they're not coming up with that on their own. They're capitalizing on ancient, old, really ugly divisions in European society that were easy to exploit and were certainly still ugly, to be sure. So anything else from Urban's speech? Because Urban is somebody that I do want to talk about. Jonathan has a question here. Were the Crusades actually a unified military effort, or were they just more of a mob? Well, it's a good question, dude. What you're going to see is that when the Crusades do eventually get to Constantinople, when that horde does get to Constantinople, it will realize that it can't continue to move as a 60,000 person mob, and they will split up. All right. So they'll split up under the leadership of a few of those military guys, Godfrey and Bohemond, and they'll split up and they'll create 3 separate crusading armies that will kind of make their way through modern day Turkey down towards Jerusalem. Okay. It is disorganized. It is a mob in many cases. And the thing is that, and I'm going to put a term in our chat here that I need you to pick up on as well. All right. The religious zeal, which is the root word of zealous, okay, which comes to us down from the ages from the Jewish group known as the Zealots, okay, cannot be underestimated. These people in Middle Ages Europe firmly believed, and this is the thing that we need to get to today before we take a little break. This was God's mission, and if they died, one of the interesting things that is mentioned in your book, page 297, is plenary indulgence. Now, we haven't talked about indulgences yet. We're going to get into them this week, next week, because it brings up one of the central kind of belief features of Middle Ages and even early modern Christian belief. I'm going to put it in here in our chat just so you can get this word down and start thinking about it. Have you guys ever heard of purgatory?
Yes.
Okay. Purgatory is not something that's mentioned very often in the modern world, but that term is crazy important in the Middle Ages to people. It was very much a central feature of Christian belief that when you died, okay, just to briefly talk about it, when you died, you were not ready to get into heaven. All right, you're too sinful, guys. This is that Augustinian. Told you we keep talking about this. This is that Saint Augustine Neoplatonic level of society. Does that make sense? From most pure God up here to sinful humanity down here. Okay, and in between were the priests and the bishops and the saints and all that stuff on the way up. Does that make sense? Okay. So guys, when you died, and there are many people that still firmly believe this within the Roman Catholic faith in the modern world, you're not ready for heaven. You're too sinful. You can't get in yet. God will not accept you yet until you cleanse yourself. You must purge yourself. The root word of purgatory is that word, purge. Okay? You've got to purge yourself of your sin, of your sinfulness. And that time, that cleansing period can take lots of time. You know, it can be, depending on how sinful you are, that's how long you're going to spend having to purge yourself of your sins. That makes sense to everybody? Okay? So the thing is that you get this term that the Pope starts to issue, all right, this word called an indulgence. All right, I'm going to put that into our chat there. All right. What an indulgence is it basically, it's a get out of purgatory free card. Okay. And a plenary indulgence, as your book describes, your sins are forgiven and you are granted admission to heaven. All right. If you struggle in this fight. Okay. So if you go on this fight, see, this is the thing, guys. This is why so many penniless people, why so many people without anything went, because people are always like, why the heck did so many people go? Like, a lot of these people knew that they weren't going to get any of the milk and honey. All the land and the fief was going to be taken and parceled out by Godfrey and Bohemond and Raymond. They went because they realized, what the hell do I got to lose? If I die in this quest, I'm getting straight into heaven. Okay, so that's one of the things that's really important to realize with Urban's speech, is that it gets there and people are like, how did so many people go? That's why. All right, that's the big why behind it. One question that I want to ask, though, because it's kind of a deeper historical question that maybe we can have a debate about it on Thursday, is there's a term that you guys, if you're historians, you're going to start talking more about this. It's a term called historical agency. All right, historical agency. What that means is kind of think about agency is how much you can actually attribute to someone for a certain situation happening. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? How much can you? And I'm going to put this in quotations. Sometimes blame. If you're having a hard time figuring out what agency means, it means blame. So, for instance, the biggest, and I hate to keep bringing up Hitler, it's odd, but everybody always asks the question, if it wasn't for Hitler, would the Nazis have happened? Like, how much blame can you really give Hitler for everything that happened? And historians will split on this. The more you get into history, historians will split into kind of two camps on this, where people will be like, if no Hitler, then no Nazis. He was the guy. He did it. His fault. Other people will say, yeah, Hitler was important, but if it wasn't just Hitler, somebody else named Whitler would have gotten in charge and done the same thing. Does that make sense? He was important, but he was the head of a much bigger social push. You guys, as little junior historians, you're going to have to figure out which camp you're going to go into on that. More with history, so the thing is with Urban is how much blame or agency does Urban get? Everybody's always like, if wasn't Urban didn't call that crusade, then nobody would have went. Full disclosure, I'm on the side in the historians camp where I'm like, these things were going to happen sooner or later. And whether Urban called for it in 1095, it was coming whether he called for it or not. That's my side. All right. Other people are going to be on a different side. For instance, within our history department, somebody like McNutt, he and I will debate on this a lot. And he'll be like, no, it's Urban's fault. If he doesn't call it, something, see what I mean, guys? So these are historical questions that you need to start asking yourself. I tend to think Urban gets a little too much credit for starting the Crusades. I think these things were coming along up the pike, whether Urban called for it or not. Just my opinion. All right. But you guys can fall on either side of that. Couple more things I want to talk about from your guys' perspective with the as far as the Crusades go. Page 305, all right, just to give you kind of a background on the Crusades, page 305 is really important because it shows you the siege, this thing called the Siege of Jerusalem. Okay, and if I can, I'm going to try and share my screen a little bit with you guys about this situation towards the end of the Crusades that they talk about with the Siege of Jerusalem. This is located in a source from the Fordham handbook that I want you guys to read over the next 24, 48 hours for Thursday. I want to talk about this source a little bit as well. The source, it has a bunch of different, guys, it has a bunch of different descriptions of the siege of Jerusalem. The big one that I want you to focus on is this one here. It's called the Gesta version, number 4. Okay, there's a bunch of different versions. If you want to, and you're bored, you know, because I'm, you know, what's that song? I'm stuck in the, I'm in the house and I'm in the house bored. I'm bored in the house and I'm in the house bored. Yeah. Is that how it goes? Okay, Ethan's laughing at me. Good. If you're bored in the house and you're in the house bored, you can read all the versions, but number 4, the Gesta version, is the most interesting one because that one hits up with what we're talking about on page 305, where they talk about how disgusting this slaughter, when the Crusading Knights finally do get into Jerusalem, how disgusting the slaughter was. All right. And your book has a line talking about when they got into the Temple of Solomon. It says, if you had only been there, for then you would have seen us wading ankle deep in the blood of those we killed. No one was left alive, not even women and children. All right. That is a primary source that describes that zeal that I want you guys to have an understanding of. Okay. There's no other way to describe or explain something like that other than the fact that the zealousness of the Crusaders. Okay. I wish, you know, your book, if you want to read forward up to page 310, talks about more of the Crusades. Okay. Up to 310 in your book, where it stops with monastic reforms. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to ask you any big questions on the rest of the Crusades because it's just not, I don't want to say it's not that important. It's just that the first one is the one that we need to focus on for our perspectives here. But it does get into talk about, you know, very famous people like Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. Maybe you've heard of him. Saladin is the if you were looking for a, you know, kind of an Islamic hero and all this, he would be their version of that. So again, the big thing over the next 24, 48 hours to come into Thursday with is watch that video if you get a chance. Okay, watch that BBC video because it really does a good job of getting into the First Crusade and what went behind it and what all the craziness was. And just how popular it was, and by popular I mean not like what we understand by popularity, but meaning how popular, meaning how many people went. All right, and you know, other than that, as far as Crusading era goes, all right, I'll narrate the back end of these notes for you during this week, and it'll talk about how they do. The thing that upsets Alexius the most is that he kind of gets an agreement from when they all get to Constantinople, and I'm talking the big boys, like the guys that are in charge of the armies, Godfrey, Raymond, those guys. He gets kind of a tacit agreement from them, like, hey, any land that you conquer, you're going to give it back to me, right? You're going to give it back to the Byzantines. And the guys are all like, yeah, sure. Can we go across the Bosphorus now? Can we get some ships to help us over there? Is basically the agreement that goes on there. And of course, when they start taking places like Antioch, which you'll see in the video, the siege of Antioch, and then down the coast to Acre, and then eventually Jerusalem, what they're going to do is, and I'll come back and I'll share my screen one more time with you guys. What they're going to do is they're going to do exactly what we expected them to do. I'm going to click on this screen right here. And like I said, I'll narrate this and it'll make more sense to you as we go through it. They're going to divide up. Can you guys see this screen now? They're going to divide up this area into, you know, the Principality of Antioch and the Earldom of the Tripolies and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And they're going to split it up and fief it up and parcel it out and vassal and this and that and fief. And the Byzantines, the leadership, Alexius and then his descendants are going to be like, what the bleep? Like, this is not what we intended. Like, this is, we intended you guys to come over and rid this region of what we considered Islamic domination, and then we expected you to go home. And the Crusading Knights are like, no, this is ours by right of conquest now, and we're going to settle here. And they begin to parcel it out and fief it out like you would expect. All right. So that hopefully you guys have an understanding of that. That's why the crusading spirit endures for so many years, is then those guys that are setting up camp way out east in those areas start sending back messages to people in Christendom like, hey, starting to get encroached on here. Why don't we send more troops out? And then Second Crusade happens, Third Crusade happens, Fourth Crusade happens. That makes sense? How all that stuff happens over the ages is once they get a foothold in there, and you can believe for darn sure, if we were to cover this from a Byzantine perspective, they're kind of caught in the middle of all this, you know, and they really, Alexius, I think, you know, there's no sources on this, but my guess would be that if you interviewed Alexius after all this happened, he'd have been like, the hell, I probably shouldn't have called for that aid, you know, because it ended up being a much more prolonged experience than I think anybody was ready for. Final John asked a question. Wasn't there also some angst among the Crusaders for the Byzantines because they were Orthodox? Certainly, absolutely. John, that's a great question, ladies and gents. You're going to get some very interestingly testy negotiations going on between kind of the Latin Roman Catholics and the Byzantine Eastern Orthodox. Certainly, that's going to be part of the discussion, without a doubt. Without a doubt, that's going to be part of the discussion. So big things, like I said, over the next couple of days as we bring to a close today. Try to complete quiz 3 sometime this week. Okay. Try your hardest to watch at least a little bit of that BBC video for Thursday while we bring the Crusades to a close. Okay. And then as we move forward, I'll send out with our invite for Thursday if you want to start reading ahead chapters and things like that, and we can start moving forward on those things. Everybody cool on that about what's happening? Awesome. We'll have, like I said, I'll put in our invite, I'll put some other things that we might want to hit on and discuss, but the big things, read those sources, pick out some things that you might find interesting from the description of the siege of Jerusalem and from the massacre of Jewish people during the Crusades. See if we can mention some interesting things with that on Thursday as well. Cool. Awesome. So glad you guys are here. So glad we're back. And like I said, later today, expect invite to come out and some things to do for Thursday. But the big thing is quiz 3 and start getting your forum posts ready so that you can complete those during this week sometime. All right. Hope it's not too much. Hope I'm not crushing you too much. And if you got any questions at all, feel free to send a message. Talk to me. All right. Cool. All right, guys. Stay safe. Okay. See you Thursday. Bye.